a Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and this is another in our Runner Stories podcast. And today, delighted to be welcomed by Owen in Cardiff. Now, Owen's going to tell us all about the Cardiff Half Marathon that he ran 3 weeks ago now. And great race, part of the Super Half series, of course. So Owen's going to give us all the background. He's also going to talk to us about his fundraising. He is also head of fundraising and communications for St John Ambulance Cymru. So that'll be interesting to get his take on it from the charity perspective as well. So welcome, Owen. Tell us all about your running career to date.
Hi, Tim. Yeah, great to be here. I think my running career is a bit potted, I would say. Did a bit of running growing up at school and stuff like that, the cross countries and that sort of style running for a little bit. And left school, kind of was at university, didn't really do an awful lot of sport at that point. But then kind of probably about 15 years ago, got back into my running a little bit. And at that point started to look at, races like the Cardiff Half and other ones that happen near Cardiff, but also further afield. And yeah, kind of have done probably about 40 to 50 races over the last kind of 10, 15 years, ranging from your small little 5-10Ks all the way up to marathons and ultra marathons as well. I do like a little ultra marathon. I find they can be quite painful, but also I think because they're a bit more relaxed, and the types of people you meet at those sort of events are the true kind of classic runners who are there kind of slogging through winter, through wind, rain and all that kind of stuff. It's quite a fun event normally. But yeah, so I did the Cardiff Half this year. I think it was the third time I've run this race. I love the Cardiff Half. It's a great event.
What's it like at the start area then? You're all nicely split into your corrals based on your predicted finish time, presumably. Is that all pretty well organised?
Yeah, well, I think when I signed up last year, I was quite ambitious with my time. I think I put 1 hour 30, which would be a PB. And so I was in the white pen, which I think was the one behind the elite runners. And actually, I'm a bit of a late comer as well. So I like to kind of get into the pen fairly late on because I don't really like standing around at the start. But I couldn't actually get into the pens. A few of us were sort of standing sort of next to the pen. And then as the runners started going off, we could get in to run off. So it was a pretty busy start area. Obviously, as the race has grown, the numbers of people in the pens is probably higher than it's ever been. And subsequently, latecomers like me, we can't actually get into the pen because they're just jam-packed full of people. But, it wasn't really an issue because once the race starts, you can kind of just filter in and off you go kind of thing. As much as I didn't run it in 1 hour 30, well, I wasn't actually that far off given how little training I'd done. I much prefer starting near the front of the race than near the back because I think you just take so long to get to the start line. I did the Paris Marathon, and through some kind of fault of the rails they had in place, a few of us runners found a gap and we went in when we probably shouldn't have gone in and just started the race with no queuing. So I do like kind of a nice easy start, if I'm honest. And some of these big city marathons and half marathons, I mean, you can take like 10, 20, 30 minutes plus to even just to get to the start line, which to me kind of like, yeah, it is quite a lot of hanging around sometimes. I do like sort of sliding in and seeing where I can cutting and just start.
Yeah, one year I ran the London Marathon in fancy dress and went over the start line in 41 minutes. So you wouldn't have particularly enjoyed that. I think I went through the 1 mile mark in just under an hour, which is a tough, you're going to have a long day out when something like that happens. Was it very, very different? I think you said that you've done it 3 times and did you tell me earlier you did one in 2013?
Yes, I think the first time I did it was around 2013, 2014.
So big differences then, presumably.
Massive. I mean, I don't know how many ran it that year, but I mean, I think this year it was like 28,000 or so that had entered. Obviously, you get a few people who don't turn up and stuff. I think even a couple of years ago, it was like 13, 14,000. So I imagine in the first one I did, it was a much smaller event. And it does feel like it's grown quite big now. The start-finish area was heaving. Most of the busy places of spectators were, kind of 5-10 people deep in some places. So yeah, the event feels really, really big now, probably comparable to the Great North Run and some of the other really big half marathons that happen both in the UK and overseas. Yeah, it's just, I think it's really, really become a much bigger event than when I first did it.
So talk us through the first half of the race then. What landmarks do you go past? I mean, you've mentioned some already, but just give us a bit of a feel for the route. You must know it like the back of your hand, having done it 3 times.
Yeah, I quite like the first half because it goes towards the west of Cardiff, which is where I live in Canton. So you go down sort of like Lansdowne Road, Sloper Road, then on to Penarth Road. There's not a lot to see around there, and actually it's probably the least spectated bit of the course. But I guess because it's in the first sort of 5K, I'm a bit like a rabbit at the start. I kind of get dragged along by all the fast runners and just think, oh, this is lovely. I guess there's a little bit of a slog up Penarth Road, so you go up a bit of an incline there, and then down the other side, then towards Penarth Marina and the bay. So yeah, the first half there's not a lot to see, and there's less spectators, but because it's the start of the race, you're kind of just happy to be running along, kind of thing. And then you run across the barrage, of course, which is lovely but very open. So I'm always looking at the wind direction the day before to see what it's going to be doing over the barrage. So we kind of had like a northwest wind this year, which meant it was kind of a bit behind you, a bit cross wind on the barrage itself, which wasn't too bad. And then you go around the bay, which is always where the crowds really pick up. So there's a few places where you've got charities like the NSPCC and others that have big cheer stations there.
And what point's that? What point on the course is
So the NSPCC one, there's like a little sort of overpass. So you run under, and there's like a bridge over down in Cardiff Bay, and I think that's one of the main NSPCC cheer points. There's always a lot of green there, and yeah, you go past the Norwegian church as well. So I actually play in a ukulele orchestra, and they're always positioned at the Norwegian church. When we went past them playing this year, was waving and shouting at them, which was really cool. So that was lovely. And yeah, there's lots of kind of people with like, kind of power up here signs and sweets and all sorts kind of dotted around the course, which is always cool.
And what about the nutrition, the water station, the gels, all that kind of stuff? What's that first half of the course like? You felt totally looked after?
Yeah. There's enough kind of water stations. I think I think I took water at most of the stations, and then they have the bins then on the side of the road as well. So there was probably one at about 5-6K, I think, and then again down the bay there was gels, I think, and water down there, and then I think there was like a sports drink probably at about 15K as well, along with maybe water again. So yeah, there was plenty of stuff available. I do quite like the gels. The sports drink this year was not very nice. It was kind of like this weird red berry flavor, and I started drinking it. I was like, oh, I don't know about this. So I stopped drinking it.
Very sensible.
So I was just like, I don't really like this. So I discarded it. And obviously part of the, with these really big races, I mean, the bottles that are just sort of flung all across. I mean, obviously there are bins, but sometimes, not everyone hits the bin, and you have to sort of dodge around bottles a little bit.
You've got to be really careful, haven't you? Because I've seen so many injuries over the years with people standing on bottles, particularly if the runner hasn't emptied the bottle and it's still pretty much full. That can be, because obviously you stand on it and it doesn't squash, does it? And that can be a real issue for people. So what about going into the second half of the race then? What are the principal landmarks that you go past?
So from the bay we go up Lloyd George Avenue, which is a really straight road, which is kind of okay, but yeah, so I don't really like long straight roads. It's kind of mentally for me it's more challenging. Then we turn, and actually at the St John office we go quite near that, so we go to the top of, we go past the Magic Roundabout, which if you know Cardiff is the roundabout with all the signs on, and then we go up to Richmond Road and then Albany Road, and that's where there's really lots of people there. Obviously, you're kind of in kind of a key shopping area, so there's loads of people there. And then we go to the wreck in Roath and run along up that, and then we get to the lake. And the lake is always the challenging bit, I find, with the Cardiff Half, because I always forget that it's not flat, because I always think it should be flat because it's like a lake. but it's not. And yeah, this year was quite a challenge going around the lake. I think I'd hit a bit of a wall, and all that lack of training really caught up to me. So I was just sort of like just trying to keep going at that point.
And
But
what
once I
mile
reached,
marker is this then?
so you reach the lake, I think, at mile 10, and then you leave the lake at mile 12. So it's
Ooh.
about 2 miles around it. And it's a tough 2 miles. I find like once I get to the top bit of the lake and then I turn back towards, the right direction to finish, then I'm okay, because it's a bit more downhill at that point. And then there's the famous Fair Oak Road. I mean, it's not really a hill, it's just like a very small little incline. But at mile 12, it's not really what you want. Because Cardiff Half is a pretty flat race, but there's a couple of little kickers. So there's that little kicker at the end where if you're struggling, you really don't want to meet that. But this year wasn't too bad. I managed to struggle up it without stopping. And then you're sort of going down Catay's Terrace past all the student area, and then you're pretty much at the finish.
Brilliant. And what time did you manage?
So I did it in 1 hour 46 this year, which was not a PB, but considering how little training I'd done, I was quite impressed that I managed to get round, because I was aiming at the start line. I was like, well, if I can do it in 2 hours, that sort of feels doable. And my other half has been running quite a bit, and he's probably a bit faster than me at the moment. So I kind of just got pulled along for a little while, and then at the end I was just sort of wanting the pain to finish, so I just sped up in the last mile to try.
You did finish together, did you?
Yeah, and it was quite. Yeah, we finished together, and we held hands aloft at the end and all that. So all the pictures you get afterwards, they're quite funny, like of us running around, and you can see where the expressions on the faces, where sort of for the first half he's doing better than me, and then for the second half there's this bit where you can see the pain on his face kind of gets worse and worse, and I'm just like there going, quite amusing to look back. Yeah.
And the crowd support, you mentioned that earlier. The crowd support was pretty good all the way around. What was it like at the lake then? Was it a bit quiet there, or pretty decent?
No, there's quite a lot of people at the lake. Yeah, maybe not as busy as, say, when you're going around Roath, so Albany Road, and also kind of the end, like Catay's Terrace is always quite busy. So yeah, there's quite a lot of people around the lake. There's quite a nice bit where I think there's like an old people's home, and they all come out kind of and sit along the sort of little terrace they've got to support you. And quite a few of the running clubs were around there as well, so they have their own little stations that they set up as well. So I saw, I think, was it Pegasus and Le Croupier and people like that kind of dotted around that bit as well.
No, that's good. And the thing is, of course, the more runners there are every year, the more spectators there's going to be every year, because all the friends and family come out. So inevitably it would have been a lot busier with supporters than it would have been the first time you did it, without a doubt.
Definitely, yeah.
So you mentioned the charity cheer zones, and you fundraised this year. So how did you go about that? When did you start as well? Because obviously starting early is the key, but I think you probably had quite a few distractions with trips to Japan and stuff. How did you get on?
I mean, I was very late to the fundraising a bit of my run, really. So obviously I'd signed up a long time before, and then I started working with St John Ambulance Cymru in January, at which point I knew I was going to do the Cardiff Half, but I hadn't sort of settled on whether I was going to fundraise or not. So it actually took me until maybe, I can't remember if it was July or August, that I actually set up my fundraising page. So yeah, I was very late in the day, and I think the target was like £250 for this year for Cardiff Half Runners for the charity. And yeah, I have fundraised bits and bobs over the years. So, but my kind of, I tend to ask people fairly directly. So obviously I've got like things like WhatsApp groups and things like that I can post the link in, and obviously on my Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that as well. But actually I would kind of go around like asking people directly as well, either messaging them personally. That worked quite well this year, so I had quite a few donations that way. And yeah, and actually, even though I started really late, I managed to probably over the course of a couple of weeks raise over 200 quid, and then the rest sort of trickled in then over the next kind of few weeks as well. So I think I raised over 300. I can't actually remember
No, that's
Didn't actually look at. I didn't look at my page at the end of before the just before the race. I did post, so I linked it to my Strava and stuff like that as well. Although it was probably a bit woeful in terms of, I think there was probably only about 2 or 3 training runs on there, yeah, and I did actually put quite a humorous little bit about the fact that this was not going to be setting any world records, and actually it was more about just surviving around. And I do this thing where I like to shout the names. So what I try and do is remember who's donated, and then shout their name at some point as I'm running around the race.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And yeah, kind of silly things like that, really, that hopefully for them as a donor kind of makes it a bit more fun and engaging, and a reason to donate. You never know. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, making it fun, exciting, engaging, I think to me is the number one thing when you're doing a bit of fundraising, and really thinking of it from their perspective and thinking, oh, what if someone came to me with this ask? Would I donate? And if the answer is no, then maybe think again about what you're doing.
And what did you find was your average sort of donation for Cardiff?
I mean, I was quite surprised. So most people were like £20 plus
Wow.
donations, I would say, on average. I mean, my mum gave me 50 quid because it's your mum, and I'll rinse that bank. I'll rinse the bank of mum for as long as I can. So yeah, I think that was probably my highest donation. But then even the other ones, a few smaller ones, but actually it feels like people are giving a bit more. The people who do give, and maybe it's fewer people giving. And as a charity, that's what we're kind of seeing a bit with some of our individual giving campaigns and appeals and stuff like that, is that the people who do give tend to give a bit more, but then you might have slightly fewer donors. And again, on my fundraising page, I tried to put kind of, X amount will pay for this, and be quite specific, I guess, as much as possible in terms of what that money could pay for. And again, that's something as head of fundraising and comms, I should hopefully be good at, but also kind of thinking about what is engaging, what's interesting. If you were giving money, what would you think was a good thing for that money to go towards if you were donating?
Just back on running again very briefly before we go. Just talk me through the differences between training and preparing for a marathon, i.e. somewhere like Paris that you've done, versus this bit of a truncated training schedule that you have for Cardiff. Presumably, if you've been on a couple of days before Cardiff and it had been a marathon, you probably wouldn't have taken it on.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah. I think with a sort of 10K, a half marathon, the body isn't necessarily playing ball all the time, but I know that if I'm not, really ill or unwell or what have you, or got a serious injury or something, or a big niggle that just won't go away, I can probably get around a 10K or a half marathon without too much trouble. It might not be much fun, but I can probably just sort of jog around. A marathon, on the other hand, is a bit more of a bit more of a challenge. And I have done a couple of marathons, and yeah, and actually I'm entered into the Newport Marathon next year, which in hindsight was probably not my best decision of all time. So there's going to have to be some winter training, I think, because the first marathon I ever did was Paris. I took that quite seriously, so I did quite a bit of training and was really well prepared. And then I was a bit silly on race day, so I ran the first half of the Paris Marathon in a PB half marathon. And then it was one of those mornings where it got quite hot. So I think it takes place in April. So it wasn't expected to be a super hot race, but it did get to about 20 degrees at about 11:30. At which point I still probably had about an hour or an hour and a half of running left, and I just died in the heat, and also from going too fast. And yeah, the last 10 kilometers was just horrific. It was just like walking basically, because I just couldn't keep going. And I think I'm one of those runners that once I've stopped, I really find it hard to get back going and getting, because I'm quite a rhythm based runner. And once I'm out of rhythm and I'm really struggling, I just can't. I find it really hard to get back into that sort of motion. So there's been a few races where I've just been a bit too gung ho and paid the price later on. But having said that, I've done a couple of ultras as well that have actually been quite all right, because I think if I know, and it tends to be a bit less of a, I want to run it in this time sort of thing as well. You just sort of run it to get round kind of thing. And I'm quite determined. So mentally, I'm quite a good runner, because I don't really mind, having miles and miles still to go. I can kind of just chug along, and I'll get there eventually, sort of thing. I quite like running like that. So to me, the big sort of races like the Cardiff Half, where you've got lots and lots of runners, like 28,000 this year, is not really my cup of tea, because the first couple of kilometers you're sort of doing a bit of dodging, and it's, even with the wide roads that they try to use, it is still quite overwhelming with the amount of people that you're trying to sort of run with. So yeah, I quite like the small ultras and trail races that you get, because it's just sort of, yeah, feels like a family. You're still kind of there. There's still people around, but you're not sort of got the crowds. But then, even with races like, because I've done Newport Marathon before, and there's sort of a middle bit of the race where you're running around the Gwent levels and there's like no one there, and that is quite challenging with that race, because obviously it's a essentially billed as a city marathon, but you just don't have supporters on the side of the road for half the race. I find that more challenging than, say, an ultra, where you're at least trail running and it's at least interesting because you've got to be aware where you put your feet. Whereas I found the Newport Marathon, I don't know why I'm doing it next year. I think it's crazy.
Yeah, I think a lot of these, like you said, they're almost billed as city centre marathons. I've done a few in the past, and literally they start and finish in a city centre, and the bulk of the race is in a very rural environment, and it is a bit strange, because mentally I think you think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something very different after a very short period of time. A race like Cardiff or London, like you said, it's bumper to bumper the whole way around. When you're choosing your marathons particularly, you have to think about that really carefully, because they are all very different, and that's for sure. Now, that was really, really helpful. I appreciate that. Would you recommend Cardiff then for first timers? I know it's sold out and the ballot results are out, but it's one that you would recommend for everybody?
I think so, yeah. I think it's a really great race in terms of support on the side of the road. The course is quite nice, and there's not too much challenge in terms of ups and downs, and there's lots of stuff to see on the way round. So if you don't know Cardiff, you'll see some of the highlights of the city. Yeah, I think it's a nice race. It's also done at a nice time of year, like the start of October. The weather tends to be okay, although luckily this year, like the day before, there was a big storm that went through, and then the Sunday wasn't too bad. So we got a bit lucky this year, because they had to cancel all the races on the day before, so the family fun runs and stuff like that all got cancelled. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely a great event to be part of.
Great stuff. All right, appreciate that, and hopefully we can catch up with you when you've done Newport, and you can tell us what that was like.
Yeah, I'm really not looking forward to it, but hopefully I'll get around. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back, as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.